Welcome to another edition of At Howard, a series that connects the university to the community, offering a wide array of topics that affect the metropolitan area and beyond. This episode focuses on enhancing the economic strength and financial wellness of Black people. Howard, in partnership with TIAA and AARP, sponsored and brought together industry experts to discuss and advise on issues like wealth inequality, home ownership, and debt management. Welcome to Financial Wellness in the African American Community, reviewing the evidence, spotlighting innovation, and considering solutions. Starting now on the latest edition of At Howard.
On behalf of the entire Howard University community, I'd like to bring you greetings and welcome you and all of our first-time guests here to Howard University. I must thank our sponsors, guest speakers, and the dedicated staff who worked tirelessly to make today a reality. Thank you for joining us, for the opportunity to engage around this critically important topic.
Please join us in welcoming Mr. Roger W. Ferguson, Chief Executive Officer of TIAA, who will provide opening remarks.
Thank you. And I'm delighted to be with all of you today. And TIAA is happy to be a co-sponsor of this important gathering. We've had the privilege of serving Howard for more than 8 decades now. And throughout that time, we've helped generations of faculty and staff prepare for a financially secure retirement. In recent years, we at TIAA have expanded our focus to include helping people to achieve financial wellness in all stages of life. In the 21st century, we're seeing some unique challenges to individuals' pursuit of financial wellness, the result of a range of demographic, economic, technological, and other trends that are reshaping the landscape and changing the rules of the game. But retirement is only one of the financial issues confronting individuals, and for many, there are other items that they view as a higher priority, such as paying down debt, including student loan debt, saving for a home, or saving for a child's education, or accumulating an emergency fund. For some, it's simply making ends meet from month to month. Moreover, in the face of what can be difficult challenges, many Americans lack the financial knowledge, the financial literacy that would enable them to make appropriate personal financial decisions. That's a brief sketch of the big picture challenge around financial wellness in our nation. And if we zero in on these trends and issues as they apply to the African American community, we find that on every measure, African Americans face greater challenges in achieving financial wellness than almost any other group. We know that the reasons are varied, many having to do with structural challenges arising out of the nation's history of racism, and the higher unemployment rates, lower wages, and occupational segregation that racism has produced. As we consider the way forward, I believe that financial literacy is a key consideration and a key component. It's clear that on this and a range of other financial issues, African Americans face some unique challenges that require creative solutions. The purpose of today's program is to illuminate both the challenges and the potential solutions, and to help to point the way to a better future. For TIAA, the bottom line is that we believe financial wellness is achievable for everyone. It should not be dependent on how much money a person makes or what kind of job they have. And it certainly should never be dependent on the color of a person's skin. So, without further ado, let's get to the program. We're going to have 2 panel sessions today. The first will outline the current financial wellness challenges in the African American community, and then the second will pivot and address some potential solutions to these challenges. We are fortunate to have with us a powerhouse moderator, CBS National News correspondent Michelle Miller, and I saw her in the back, and she is just filled with energy, so she's going to be great. And we have a tremendous group of panelists who will bring great diversity of perspectives and a wide range of expertise to all of these issues. I want to thank you again for taking the time to be here. I hope that today's program both informs and also inspires each of us to do our individual parts to work toward improved financial wellness in the African American community and more broadly in America at large. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Our first panel discussion this morning is entitled Examining the Current State of Financial Wellness in the African American Community. Our distinguished panelists are Ms. Camille Bousset, Senior Fellow, Brookings Institute; Dr. Baron H. Harvey, Dean of the Howard University School of Business; Ms. Anna Marie Lasardi, Founder and Academic Director of the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center at George Washington University. This panel will be moderated by Ms. Michelle Miller, co-host of the CBS This Morning Saturday and CBS National Correspondent. Please join us in welcoming our moderator and distinguished panel.
Take have a seat. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am so excited to be here because y'all know this is home for me. I am a Howard University grad, 1989, third generation Howardite. And I remember all those times being out where you are right now, homecomings, convocations, so this is gonna be a lot of fun. What are your findings in terms of our financial wellness, and what are some of the problems?
When we talk about the financial well-being of African Americans in the U.S., I think it's very important to understand the context within which African Americans have had to operate when it comes to having enough money to deal with daily expenses, planning for the future, being able to handle emergencies, and to have something extra to do something rewarding for yourself or for your community. And that context is one where space, both physical and narrative, has been regulated. It's a regulation that has been reinforced by laws, conventions, covenants, and violence. So think about slave cabins, the back of the bus, redlining, school segregation, and lynching. And that context is also one where African Americans were historically excluded from good union jobs, jobs that had benefits, and constant stream of wages. And we have also been excluded from capital financing, often being rejected for business and home loans, and most recently for being offered subprime loans when we qualified for prime loans, and by being severely underfunded in venture and small business capital loans. So in virtually every facet of American life, there has been a history of explicit efforts to ensure that African Americans could not build wealth, could not go to good schools, and could not own homes that appreciated in value, and could not access jobs with benefits. In addition, I think it's very well known that African American men in particular are most likely to experience economic difficulties. And this is of course due to tremendous racism that is particularly acute for African American men, something they experience from preschool throughout the rest of their lives. And it explains why even well-educated African American men consistently earn less than their similarly educated white peers. So it's against this history that one of my colleagues at Brookings, Richard Reeves, has noted that in the current moment, there is a persistent race gap with respect to intergenerational mobility, so the ability of a child to do better than his or her parents. And this mobility gap means that much of the progress towards closing the race gap made by one generation is lost in the next. And the result is a century-long delay in economic improvements for Black Americans. So that means it will take fully 1 century for African American males in particular to achieve the same rates of upward mobility as their white counterparts. So I think what we want to think about in this particular conversation is when we discuss the financial health of African Americans, it's really important to note that getting your finances right is critical to preserving the hard-won gains of your parents and grandparents and your ability to contribute to your community.
Yeah, that's a big unless. We have 100 years to catch up unless. And part of my understanding with our financial wellness came with the notion, you mentioned it as a mobility gap, and I saw it as an inheritance gap. And that way, it really codified it for me. Oh, you mean the fact that lesser wages and nothing to pass on to that next generation. Which brings us to you, Anna. I mean, if you look at the research that you found with regard to African Americans on financial literacy and the segments of the populations that we are, because we fit into so many different categories. What's the nuance here on our personal finance knowledge? Because there is a nuance. I mean, we're just in many spheres as educated as the next person. But where is the unless factor that we are penetrating?
What we found in our studies is, first of all, that knowledge is actually low overall in the population. It's actually very low given the type of financial decision we all have to make and how many more financial decisions we have to make. And in particular, I want to talk about the student loan. So actually our finding, and perhaps the surprising finding, is even though now we are requested to make so many financial decisions, when we look at the knowledge, what we need to have in order to make good financial decisions is low everywhere. And I want to mention the groups for which knowledge is particularly low. And there are two groups I'm very passionate about, and we really see strikingly low level of financial literacy. And this group are women. And I say that in general, this is true overall. It's actually even true around the world. So there is a gender difference in financial literacy. Another gap that we need to fill. There is a strong difference across age group. So the other group, of course, I'm very passionate about being an academic, is young people. And we see young people today starting, in a sense, their economic life with a very, very low level of financial knowledge.
So they're worse off than we were?
In a sense, they are, because they are facing a much more complex world. We also see very, very strong and, I think, ingrained racial and ethnicity differences when it comes to financial literacy. And we see that the African American community is even more disadvantaged because that level of financial literacy is even lower among the African American community. And that's why I hope that today is the beginning of a strong conversation about what we can do about filling that gap.
Okay, let's get to it, and we leave that. We start into the nitty-gritty, so to speak, with your very own Dean of Business. Doc, if you could, both Anna and Camille sort of laid it out for us. What does it mean? I mean, what does it mean for students who are in this position?
We are in need of constant and reinforcing financial education.
What does that look like?
Well, in my view, what it looks like is that in secondary schools, there are required courses. And that is reinforced once a student moves or matriculates to college or post-secondary education. But it goes beyond that. My feeling...
Well, let's start right there, because like I look at our education system and civics is gone, the arts is gone. So pie in the sky to expect that we're going to teach financial literacy at that level, where is that going to come from?
Well, I think it comes in a number of areas. And of course, it's not simply the responsibility of schools and colleges. It is families and communities as well. When you arrive here at Howard University, and if you arrive as a business school student, for example, you are in fact exposed early on to financial modules and workshops. You know, when you think about it, again, students, particularly African American students, are targets. And they have to be equipped on how to evaluate those many things that come at them. And that kind of education would give them that. Two things which I think will modify how we move forward with education in financial literacy. And one is that, again, it has to be continual throughout their collegiate life. But secondly, it has to have more of an applied approach to it. What I'm seeing is that those who have resources, even without a financial literacy education, those who have resources to invest, those who have resources for retirement plans, become more knowledgeable about that because they are vested in it. And I think what we need to do in college education is have a more applied approach. For example, in the School of Business, our students each semester have an opportunity to have a mock portfolio that they invest $100,000, and at the end of each semester, they in fact have an opportunity to win scholarship dollars. That's the kind of applied approach that we have to take. And it has to be multifaceted. It has to talk about borrowing. It has to do with evaluating credit and credit cards and how to secure oneself that we are making the right decisions for not now, but into the future.
Have you changed the way, as I recall, across the way of the Student Union Center, there were credit card operators there, and they were just signing students up left and right. I mean, it seems to me that the financial literacy needs to start right over there or wherever they're allowed to come with a lesson on debt, and credit card debt in particular.
That's right. And when students come here at Howard as freshmen, during freshman orientation, we let them know that when they leave Crampton Auditorium, there are individuals outside selling you credit cards.
They're selling you money at a premium.
They're selling what they purport to be free money, but it is in fact money that's going to cost them in the long run. And then we try to educate them in that regard. But you're right.
I mean, is there a proactive program that is looking at real estate investment, which is certainly part of financial literacy? It has certainly become less so now by many respects because, you know, the home at one time was a huge wealth builder for African Americans. Yes. But real estate really is.
I think for students particularly, there are several opportunities to really have them work on principles of financial literacy. And the first place I think to start is with student loans. So, you know, according to the National Survey of Consumer Finances in 2018, for African Americans between the ages of 18 and 34, about 56% of them reported having student loans. And that's slightly above the average for 18 and 34-year-olds in that sample, more generally. So right there, you're seeing a slightly higher level of indebtedness in student loans. And I think that's a great place to start, if it hasn't been started already, a conversation about, okay, now you have this fairly significant level of debt, and how is it that you pay that off? With respect to your point on investment, one of the main issues that African American businesses face and have faced for a really long time is that bankers are really very hesitant to invest in those businesses for a variety of different reasons. And that does make it a little harder for those businesses to survive. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us in Washington, D.C. to think a little harder about how we get that capital flowing in such a way that becomes the lifeblood of many communities.
You are absolutely right that, you know, the house might just be a great way to build wealth and so on. But when we look, for example, at the African American community, the data from the National Financial Capability Study, first of all, shows that a lower percentage of African Americans are homeowners. But when you look at the debt and at the management of the mortgages, you really see the big struggles there, and the number are staggering. First of all, even though 42% of African Americans are homeowners, 27% are underwater. So if they were to sell the house, they would actually get less than what they pay for in the mortgage versus 7% of white.
So much of that, though, happened during the housing crisis of 2008
and it hasn't,
2009.
And it hasn't, in a sense, picked up. And we are looking at data in 2018. So even the more recent data shows that. Not only when you look, for example, at mortgages, 46% of African Americans homeowners have been late with a mortgage payment in the past year versus 14% of white. So, you know, again, we see this struggle, also this financial struggle, and this is also where the financial literacy come in, and is very important. It has to be part of the personal finance curriculum and so on. You know, when we make decisions about such an important asset, you know, it's really important to have those basic skills to be able to make the best decision that fits the need of the household.
When we talk about the transformation that's happening here in Washington, and as you drive down Georgia Avenue, we also need to remember is that sometimes in this country, it's also how you begin. And you mentioned in your comments about inheritance. And if you look at the statistics, you'll see that only 13% of African-American families are able to provide an inheritance to their heirs, where you have more than 41% in the white community. And when you look at the amounts, it's staggering as well. When you talk about something along $39,000 versus $160,000. And that makes a big difference. When you talk about young people finishing college and with no debt, that's a result of them having the wealth within their family or an inheritance that they've had. When you talk about young people affording $500,000 homes in this community, having been only 23 and 24 years old, that's a function of the wealth of that family and or the inheritance that come forward. So again, the African American community is in fact, again, starting off a little behind the whole process. But as Camille had pointed out, we have to come up with strategies within the community, within our city governments, within the federal government that addresses this, because it is a detriment to everyone to have a segment of American society that's not fully engaged. Means that we are not all benefiting from the efforts of everyone.
And with that, we will say goodbye to our fabulous, fabulous panel. Camille Busette, Director, Race, Prosperity, and Inclusion Initiative at the Brookings Institute. Clap, 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 clap.
Thank you.
Baron H. Harvey, the Dr. Dean, here at the School of Business at Howard University, and Anna Maria Lusardi, Academic Director, Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center, GFLEC. I like that. Thank you so much, and on to our next panel.
Ms. Lisa Menza, President and Chief Executive Officer for the Opportunity Financial Network. Ms. Stacy Tinsdale, financial journalist, author, and Chief Executive Officer of the Mind Money Media Incorporated. Dr. Frederick Weary, Professor of Sociology at Princeton University and Director of the Dignity and Debt Network. And returning as our moderator, Ms. Michelle Miller.
Have a seat. I'm back. So glad to see you. Well, it's clear from our first panel that, we know the problem, we've identified it, we've studied it, and now we're scared to death of it. And it's kind of a Debbie Downer, kinda. So I wanted to start this panel off with some good news, because there is good news out there. And I really wanted to talk about, since we're talking about financial sickness, let's just jump into our wellness. Let's just start off in a positive note. Stacey, take us there.
When you look at the history of Black wealth in this country, the Black economy really began when President Lincoln freed the slaves. And he said, Black people have the potential to be a tremendous part of the economy. I'm going to give them the Freedmen's Bank. Within 10 years of being slaves, those freed slaves amassed $60 million in those days' terms in the Freedmen's Bank. Those deposits were stolen from them. We have events like the Great Migration, when you had African Americans walk away from land values that they didn't know the value of. We have things like redlining, when we weren't able to participate in wealth building, and that real estate piece is still what's at the heart of the wealth gap. Despite these tremendous odds, Black households in the United States at every level above 60,000, including 200,000, are the fastest growing income group in the country. Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the country, majority owners in over 1 million businesses, creating $7.7 billion in payroll. We have Black buying power at $1.5 trillion. The conversation has got to change because I challenge any group to create the wealth that the Black community has created in the face of those odds. We are an incredible story of resilience. We need to stop looking at each other and at ourselves like we're at the bottom of the gap. We are an economic force to be reckoned with, and we deserve an equal seat at the table, but our mindsets have to shift first.
That's my girl. So Fred, you talk about dignity and debt.
I like to use the metaphor of if you had a coach or a trainer and you were exercising a lot outside to try to get yourself healthy as an individual, but the neighborhood in which you're doing that exercise, there are toxins in the air, the water that's coming through your pipes, it's contaminated, and people keep dumping hazardous products, financial products, in your neighborhood, but you're still outperforming how you should be performing.
Still paddling that canoe.
You're still paddling that canoe, and you're doing it because you have a sense of dignity, and you want to protect both your own sense of dignity and the dignity of the people that you love. And so when we see people sometimes engaged in behaviors that don't seem to make sense to us because they're taking out high-priced loans, but guess what? It was the start of the school year, and they want their kids to feel like other kids, or they are sending money to parents with inadequate retirement savings because they want to also make sure that their parents can go into old age with a sense of honor. And so we're doing things that we just don't get credit for, and a lot of the advice and solutions that are coming to us are not designed with dignity in mind.
I'm so proud to be on this stage with this group because I represent a network of community development financial institutions. And I'm here to say you're not alone. Your circumstances, wherever you began, you live in America and you are part of a community. And I fight for institutions to help bring fair financial products to help everybody climb on that ladder. The quest for wellness is, yes, what you do, and you got lots of strategies from the prior panel, but part of the solutions are about the institutions that are in place to help us all grow. And my institutions, my groups are out there to make the loan to the small business owner. I learned of a Howard grad, Kiana Knowles, who started a shuttle bus company. And when she went to a bank, she couldn't get the loan to start that shuttle bus company. And so she found City First Enterprises here in DC. And City First underwrote her credit differently. They saw her skill, her connections, and they did the loan to that business, and that's why it could grow. That company couldn't have grown if it wasn't for a lender who could step outside of rigid credit boxes and help her grow. So that's part of this financial wellness journey.
Identifying those institutions that support your community. That goes to a story I have to say on a woman who had an incredible invention called the Quick Biscuit in Dallas, Texas, Fort Worth, Texas, to be exact, who, when Pillsbury came looking to buy her recipe, she said, no, I'm gonna finance, I'm gonna management, because she already done it in her community and in her region. And she could not get a loan. As a woman, an independently financed woman, she could not get a loan. This was in the mid-1940s. And 3 years later, Pillsbury had the recipe. Kilolo, you recently testified before the U.S. House of Representatives, the Financial Services Subcommittee on Diversity and Inclusion specifically, that the solutions to racial and gender wealth gap here in America require bold, equitable policy changes. That's in quotes. So what are the changes you see that need to happen?
Sure. So it is wonderful to be back at Howard. I graduated here from the School of Social Work. And yes, and I want to take a minute to talk about what the racial wealth gap is. It is the difference in the net worth between white families and families of color. And net worth is what you own minus what you owe. White families hold 10 times the net worth of African American families. So in other words, a white family that has $1 of wealth, for every $1 of wealth that a white family has, an African American family has a dime. Now, given that the racial wealth gap did not result from individual or family or community poor choices, we need to look at systemic remedies. And one of these bold solutions was proposed by Derek Hamilton, who is the executive director of the Kirwan Institute at Ohio State University. And Derek proposed that there be baby bonds, and baby bonds are the endowment for every newborn based on the wealth of their family. So a baby born into an affluent family would receive an endowment of about $500. A baby born into a low-wealth family would receive on the order of $60,000. These would be publicly funded endowments. They would be held by the government, much like Social Security trust funds, and they would be managed by the Treasury Secretary. When a child reaches young adulthood, they would have their endowment and would be able to purchase an asset like a home or higher education or a business. And with that, each young person would be able to start their adult life with some economic security. The government already provides incentives, tax subsidies to incentivize families to build wealth. The problem is most of that is going to the top 20% of income earners. A more equitable distribution of these tax subsidies would more than pay for baby bonds.
That's innovative. I guess that's really thinking outside of the box. You wanted to say something, Stacy?
I did a 6-year research project into what drives financial behavior, and I realized that, all of the countless people that I've talked to in my career, from peasants to presidents all over the world, all the people that I interviewed for my research, were basically saying the same 3 things in different ways when it comes to what's at work in our financial behavior. And I call them the big 3 money scripts. And I use the term scripts, just like an actor follows scripts. We blindly follow these money scripts. The first is childhood scripts, the way you saw money managed or not, handled or not, in your home and around you when you were growing up. Literally, leaves one of the biggest imprints on your brain of how money's supposed to be handled. There's social scripting. We all feel the pressure to keep up. That's human. It's social images in the media, how we're supposed to live, what we're supposed to have. Social scripting around gender roles, race and culture. Huge imprint on what you believe about yourself. And then there's the songs we play in our head, what I call those messages. Investing's only for the rich. I'll always struggle with debt. All of those messages we tell ourselves. So when we talk about financial literacy, it's much more than just numbers. So understanding your patterns, understanding your conditioning, not for the sake of getting lost in your own psychology, just so you can say, oh, hey, here's that. That doesn't serve me. I'm going to step out of that. And working with companies who care enough about you to understand who you are. TIAA, AARP have us here. They're committed to understanding. And before I'm quiet, the last thing I will say is what is so critical for everyone to understand is we are in a new world now. We are in a new economy. I literally just trademarked the word zapitalism. The capitalist economy is really ending in Generation Z, and we're moving to a gig model. Within the next decade, over half of the US workforce will work entrepreneur, freelance, solopreneur, or gig work. That's a completely different model. That means there's new tools. Technology is proving to be the equalizer that the government and the financial services industry couldn't do. There's apps. You can crowdfund down payments. You can, you can build credit, you can invest small sums. So understanding the world you live in and understanding the new tools that you have is really critical to thriving.
One of the things that Stacy's comments remind me of is the tradition that comes from a place like Howard, where when you don't see, let's say you don't see the literature you want to see in the bookstores reflecting and respecting you, you then make your own literature. And so one of the things that we have to also think about is how do we make our own products and services that reflect the patterns and priorities that we see all around us. And we're seeing this happening in fintech, we're seeing this happening in other spaces, but there is an opportunity for thinking about innovation. And this is important because often we get advice that's being sent to us, but it's not advice that's coming either from us or from our experiences.
African Americans and whites are equally likely to have received financial education, equally likely to have received. But African Americans are less likely to have received financial guidance. So where do they go aside from a Howard University or a TIAA or, Lisa Mentz's, Opportunity Network, Finance Network? Where do they go? Fred?
So I'm on the board of a national nonprofit called the Financial Clinic. And so there you have coaches. And the great thing about coaching is, when you go to a coach or a trainer, they're setting realistic goals for you. And the other thing too is that coaches can also share experiences across coaches. And so find yourself a good coach, right? So if you want to get healthy, get a coach.
Kilola?
So if you're going to look for an advisor, I recommend looking for one that is going to serve as a fiduciary, has fiduciary responsibility. And by that, I mean an advisor who is required to act in the best interest of his or her client. An advisor who is not going to have their client incur fees that would help, that would benefit the advisor, but strip wealth from the client.
I want to start by also inserting in, because I think they're going to go online, and they'll probably find Fred's organization, Financial Clinic. But there's the step about the advice, and then there's your money. And I think that the advice needs to be twinned with a safe institution and a fair institution. It's why there are laws, and it's why I think when you have an account with, in my field, it's community development credit unions or community banks, who not only can have a fiduciary, but also be on your side and are not trying to go for the highest fee product. If you're a credit union member, you're part owner in the institution. So I do think that, and many people will be in several financial institutions. I hold my retirement wealth with TIAA-CREF, but I bank with a bank and a credit union. And you might be in several. And I would just say that the advice also needs to happen with, in the automated way, in the way you hold your money. And there's where the institutions matter. And I would encourage everyone to make sure they're holding their money with someone who wants you to win and is looking for the lowest price, so that you're not just having to go to a big box shop and take their financing deal, which will end up paying 3 times for your TV set, but do it through a credit union or through somebody who's got your back when you're transacting.
Having come from Howard University, none of the students I ever left with were shy about pushing the envelope or asking questions. And I would just venture to say that, no matter what your wealth, ask how to grow it, right? Because there are people in those institutions. Sometimes we don't ask.
Right.
Sometimes we don't ask.
Right.
One of the tools to successful financial behavior is to have a helping relationship. And when you are seeking out financial advice, again, look around you. And if I was in this room right now, I'd be looking around, okay, there's 2 companies here who care about me. So you have a great financial resource there. You do actually have an 89% better chance of achieving a goal, financial goals included, if you have what's called a helping relationship. If you have a plan and if you tell your friend about your plan and if your friend holds you accountable to your plan, you have an 80+% better chance of achieving it. Your financial advisor should serve as your helping relationship. So also know that our tendency, I think only 7% of African Americans use financial advisors. We don't trust the financial services industry, and we have very good reason not to trust the financial services industry, and the financial services industry has to earn our trust. But again, one of the things to your financial success is going to be resources, and that's going to come from that industry, and it's going to come from technology. So again, don't look at your finances as something that you have to go to alone.
The recent TIAA MIT Age Lab study showed that 84% of American adults report that student loans are negatively impacting the amount that they are able to save for retirement and other long-term goals. What are your thoughts on how to balance that short-term, long-term financial needs? It was part of a question we had from an earlier panel. And in particular, how should people prepare for inevitable emergencies? Because folks forget that stuff happens. Stuff happens.
Don't you get scared when you hear financial advisors say everybody needs to have enough expenses saved in an emergency fund to cover 6 months worth of expenses? Don't you hear that number and you're like, well, gee, that's like my whole salary. But on the road to that 6 months worth of expenses, that's just something you strive for. When you build it up to a couple $100 and you have that blowout, you're really going to be glad it's there. So every penny that you start to build in that emergency fund starts to help you create financial security. So when you're thinking long-term, short-term, again, it all begins with your goals. Really get a clear picture of what is this life that I want to live. What does it look like? And what does it cost? And that number, knowing your number in and of itself, will help you keep your spending on track. I always say to my son, did you ask yourself the big three before he buys anything? Can I afford this? Is it in line with my goals? And if it's not, why am I doing it? And once you get in the habit of asking yourself that, then you're going to be in a position to solve the right problem. Once you get your numbers in line, if you're still having problems, and you can now see, is it a spending problem or is it an income problem? You know, money's a spiritual journey. Money is a beautiful way will reflect back to you where you're not living in line with your priorities. So you might need to take on that side hustle. You might need to do what you need to do to get yourself in that position. And again, knowing the world that you live in, student loans, so many employers now, just like they offer a 401k or a retirement perk, are offering to pay your student loan debt as a benefit.
I just thought the prior panel had a good set of advice on the balancing of student debt and homeownership. And I think partly when we have a solutions conversation, I wanted to double down and say, we're going to have to figure out a way to do both and not to be scared of that. Homeownership isn't over for folks. And we're part of the network of institutions that are making sure that's true. We can't just have this wealth divide persist like this. And CDFIs get up in the morning in the face of gentrification or in the face of rural communities and native communities that have had no investment in home ownership. And we're out there both on the construction side and on the mortgage side. And so I thought the prior panel was sort of saying, don't give up. And I wanted to say that there are a set of institutions that are also not giving up. They're not conceding that we're done in urban America, that when communities gentrify, and some gentrification can give us beautiful things, but we don't want to push out the opportunity to own a home. And that's what we fight for. The way that cities like DC, which are experiencing growth, we should not lose the opportunity to also preserve the chance for people to still own a home.
And I just wanted to reiterate that we need to be aware of the drivers of the student debt. Why are students having to go into this amount of debt? And we need to, in addition to making wise choices right now, we need to be advocating for bold solutions that will address these structural barriers, eliminate these structural barriers. If, for example, there was a baby bond for every newborn, by the time they became 18, they would have an asset with which to purchase higher education without having to go into debt. Or if they chose to purchase a home, they would have the down payment for that home.
I was very proudly and rightfully so talking about all the income gains the Black community has made, but this wealth gap is never going to really close until that home ownership piece of the puzzle is solved. Home ownership in the Black community is at its lowest level ever, while home ownership in white communities is rising. And there have never really been more tools that we can use to own homes. You have, recently did a story with Fannie Mae, and make sure, talk to your lender about whether they're Fannie Mae or not. You can get there's companies now and mortgages now that offer crowdfunding for down payment. They have so many new products that allow you to get homes with no down payment. There's a new product that actually, if you're going to buy a home and use part of it for Airbnb, that income can count towards the income you need to qualify for a mortgage. We're seeing fintech, financial technology. I was recently reading a research study, reduces bias in borrowing, because we get a much harder time when we go to borrow money. It reduces bias in borrowing by 50% by taking out the human aspect of it. 3 quick questions everyone should always ask themselves. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do with your time and your life? If you go to the doctor, you find out you have 5 to 10 years left to live. What changes would you make in your life if you just had 5 to 10 years left to live? If you found out this was it, this is your last day, what do you regret doing? Think about that, you'll kind of connect with what's important to you, and then make sure that your financial circumstances can support it and what you feel comfortable with. So financial wellness is not being defined by your financial circumstance, no matter what it is, and making sure that you're taking steps to empower yourself.
And let's just be clear that even when we're in oppressive systems, we can still be well. And so if we think about our histories, when Ida B. Wells was fighting the fight and saying, actually, there are lynchings and we have to report these lynchings. The system was not well, but she was well. And we see these examples time and again, Elaine Locke from here, when literature was a mess. Literature was not well, but he was well. And so we have to sort of be very careful about thinking about what we do with ourselves and in our communities, and how that doesn't have to be a reflection of the environments in which we find ourselves.
And with that, we have to say adieu. Kilolo, Lisa, Stacy, Fred, we want to give you a big round of applause. Please stand, take a bow.
So I want to begin this afternoon by thanking Howard University for hosting this event and for joining with our partners at TIAA and our panelists for tackling the important issues around financial wellness, particularly in the African American community. As we heard from our panelists this morning, African Americans face a number of challenges when it comes to achieving a level of financial wellness, especially around the unexpected financial challenges and emergencies like student loan debt, saving for retirement, and others. But on the positive side, however, there are a number of steps we can take and an increasing number of resources available to help improve financial well-being among all African Americans. This is a huge issue for us at AARP. Our purpose is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. Notice I didn't say empower old people how to choose how they live as they age, just people, because we're all aging every day from the moment we're born. But to do this, we do have to focus on 3 areas: health security, financial resilience, and fun and fulfillment, or what I like to call health, wealth, and self. If there's one thing that we've learned at AARP over the years, it's that if you want to have a good life when you get older, and all of us who are older know this, you have to begin preparing when you're younger. We are all the products of the choices that we've made throughout our lives, and this is especially true in achieving financial wellness. The U.S. is facing growing threats to financial well-being driven by factors such as drastic reductions in pension plans, uncertainty around Social Security, increased healthcare costs, longer lifespans, and our inability to save, our student loan debt, and the shift of savings to shorter-term needs. And as African Americans, and particularly Black women, we are disproportionately affected by all of this. Significant wage gaps due to racial biases and gender disparities have lowered their income earnings potential, and a lack of financial and investment-related education has left many African Americans, particularly Black women, behind as they prepare to move forward. And the daily financial pressures of caring for her family and loved ones has caused her to put their needs above her own. And all this leaves African American women in particular less prepared for what has to come in retirement years. AARP recently conducted a national survey of adults in the U.S. aged 30 and older and found that 3 in 5 African Americans experienced an unexpected financial challenge in the past year. And of those, 2 in 3 experienced more than one unexpected financial challenge. The main causes were medical expenses and necessary repairs, followed by legal expenses, education costs, tax bills, and of course, caregiving. To cope with all these challenges, the majority of us make trade-offs, cutting back on expenses, delaying payment of bills, withdrawing money from our checking or savings accounts, or working extra hours to increase our income. Less than half of us ask for an affordable payment plan or a reduction in the amount that we owe. And then there's the issue of student loan debt. A college education is still seen as a path to fulfilling dreams in America, but it isn't just young people who are struggling to repay student loans in the pursuit of our dreams. Our Public Policy Institute found that over the last 15 years, total student loan debt has more than tripled to $1.5 trillion as of last year. And the increase has been the greatest among older borrowers. Nearly 1 family in 10, headed by someone over the age of 50 and older, is carrying student loan debt with an average balance of $33,000. Today's young people are often on the path to grow old without gaining financial security. Repayment periods required to pay off student loan debts are now 20 to 25 years, double than it was when I paid off my student loan in 10 years. When we look at all these factors together, it's no surprise that one of the things we fear most is outliving our income. Unfortunately, for many of us, this is a very real issue. Consider this. A 10-year-old child today has a 50% chance of living to be 104. And the average life expectancy of children born in high-income countries, including the U.S., over the next decade is projected to increase to nearly 100 years old. In other words, a 100-year lifespan is becoming a reality, and we need to realign and redesign our life course, considering the fact that many of us may live to be 100. In closing, at AARP, we believe the time has come to change the conversation, or in many cases, start one, about financially preparing for our latter years. What if instead of savings for retirement, we think instead of savings for life? Saving for the opportunity to do the things over the course of your lifetime that you've always wanted to do. This new vision of financing our futures expands from saving for retirement to enhancing our financial resilience throughout our lives, especially during our traditional retirement years. And when we approach this in this way, we begin to take a holistic approach when it comes to financing our future. Our focus is not just on saving for retirement, but it's on tracking where our money goes each and every day, on building those emergency funds that some of our panelists talked about. It's about preparing for the financial pressures and protecting our assets and becoming more educated about managing our money. The goal of financial resilience is not just the absence of financial hardship, it's having the means to accomplish our life goals and our purpose. It's about thriving and being able to afford the life we want to live. Jeanette Karan, a singer, songwriter, and author of Destined for Greatness, reminds us that freedom comes when you're brave enough to chase your dreams and achieve the success and financial freedom that you want. Achieving that financial wellness can be a challenge for anyone at any age, but it is especially challenging for all of us in the African American community. But we also know that when we understand what the challenges are and what solutions are available to us, we can overcome anything. We can achieve that financial wellness that will empower us to all choose how we live and how we age every day. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being an important part of this program here at Howard University. And I want to thank my AARP family. I see so many faces out there in the audience, and to all of our panelists who have participated in our program today. Thank you.
This program was produced by WHUT, Howard University Television, and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.